Schweizer's new book is called Profiles in Corruption. It's a book from 2011, though, that should be reviewed because of what's going on in the Senate. 3 senators sold stock knowing that the coronavirus was coming, the Wuhan flu. There's some Republicans involved in this. Democrat Dianne Feinstein. We'll talk about the personalities. His book, Throw Them All Out, it caused a change. It made insider trading illegal. Then, bipartisan affair, they decided to make it legal again so they can roll in cash. Peter Schweizer joins us on the Rush Limbaugh program. Peter, it's Todd Herman filling in. Great to talk to you again.
Hey, great to be with you, Todd. Thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate it. Let's just talk about this, what happened in these stock sales. So it looks like they learned that this was going to be very bad. Senator Burr went and spoke to investors saying, hey, this is going to be bad. Give people a taste of what went on with this, and then let's talk about what we can do to get back to where you had us in this nation.
Yeah, I mean, the Senator Burr example is particularly egregious. I mean, I've exposed corruption involving Republicans and Democrats for more than a decade, and this is really one of the worst situations. Bottom line, Senator Burr, who in 2018 his net worth was around $1.7 million, essentially got briefings from federal officials saying how bad this pandemic was going to be. And then over the course of the next couple days had 33 sale transactions of stock, representing at least, if not more, of half of his entire net worth. The point being, you know, he was not being bashful here. He was basically selling just about everything that he could sell. And 1 week later, his stock portfolio would have been down 30% had he held that stock. So this is what you look for in insider trading. You look at, did they have access to inside information? Senator Burr absolutely did. We know he attended the briefing. We know what the briefing now said. Number 2, were there anomalies in his stock transactions? Absolutely they were. If you go back and look at his stock transactions running back previous years, you really cannot find another example where he's dumping 33 stock in that short a period of time. I think this needs to be taken up by the Department of Justice to see if it involves insider trading. It needs to be taken up by the Senate leadership. We need to know who he talked to, who he shared this information with, and I think, frankly, that given this conduct, he should resign.
Yeah, it's phenomenal that there are 3 Republicans who are said to be involved in this. There's Dianne Feinstein, of course, a Democrat. Richard Burr, we've been talking about him. Kelly Loeffler, Georgia. James Inhofe of Oklahoma. Loeffler, her husband is with the New York Stock Exchange. He's chairman of the New York Stock Exchange. I would think that's also doubly concerning, Peter, because, you know, Americans, we might watch the news and say, hey, I'm nervous about this. I've got a friend who trades stocks, and he was nervous. But these guys, they have to be getting information that we don't. And to say otherwise, it's a lie on its face, as I see it, Peter.
Oh, absolutely. You're exactly right, Todd. And here's the thing we have to factor in. Not only these individuals that dumped stock before the crisis, but let everybody keep in mind that this stimulus that has been passed, that was crafted in the House, went through the Senate, signed by the president, that involves bailouts and all these tax deals, the people who wrote that legislation are basically free to trade stock in the very companies that are going to be bailed out. I mean, that's how bad it is. So you're exactly right. I mean, as Washington, D.C. has gotten more powerful, has gotten more control over our lives, it gives them a greater ability to affect and make winners and losers in the stock market. And that information is highly, highly valuable. A lot of hedge funds now practice something called political intelligence, where they basically hire ex-senators or congressmen or ex-congressional staffers, and they have them troll for information on Capitol Hill that they can trade on, and it can be an extremely lucrative, but I would say very troubling pattern of behavior.
Peter Schweizer's with this latest book is Profiles in Corruption. I'd suggest that we Throw Them All Out #1 again across the board today. And to reread this, Peter, I don't know if you heard me just kind of teasing your appearance before the break. I told this story about Barney Frank, who literally, Peter, I watched, you heard this. So folks in Rush's audience who didn't, I watched Barney Frank give insider tips to 200 power brokers in Washington, D.C. By the way, Peter, that was on official property. That was in the Longworth office building where he did this. And no one thought anything of it. Peter, it was commonplace. I think if the American people knew that in this stimulus that there are people now who can short sell, they can go long, they could go really long. You're talking about an ability, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, you can build generational wealth buying an airline that you know is going to get bailed out. You know the terms, you know how much, you know whether it's a loan. President Trump saying he doesn't want to see this used for stock buybacks. I applaud that. I don't know that the American people know how mobbed up these people are sometimes.
Oh, yeah, I think you're exactly right, Todd. It's a bipartisan problem. It's a human corruption problem. And the only way that we are going to deal with this, it's not a fail-safe solution, but the only way you deal with this is by insisting that any elected official, or I would say senior bureaucrat that has a net worth north of $100,000, they need to put all their assets in a blind trust. A real blind trust. Now, what some of these people are saying, Senator Loeffler has kind of implied this, Dianne Feinstein has talked about, well, I've got my assets in trusts, so I don't have any control over them. If you look at the Senate disclosure forms, they are not in blind trusts. They are in investment trusts, which are totally different. And what that means is they can call up their broker and say, I just had one heck of a briefing. You know, the sky is falling. And the broker can act on that information, and that's inside information that is given to the senator behind closed doors by a senior health official, and that is huge market-moving information. So it's a huge problem, and the only way to deal with it, I think, is to have a standard blank rule. The other thing I would say is that, you know, Senator Loeffler has used this explanation, Senator Feinstein has, basically saying, well, look, we're so wealthy, we don't need to engage in that kind of behavior. And, you know, the problem is, Todd, if you look at insider trading cases that occur on Wall Street they involve very wealthy people. So this is not a question of how wealthy you are. It's whether you feel like the rules don't apply to you or whether you feel like you can get away with it. That's the issue. So this needs to be taken seriously. These individuals need to be investigated. Who did they communicate with after they got these briefings? Did they talk to their spouse? Did they email their broker? That stuff should be subpoenaed and should be looked at.
Yeah, look, I think there's so much we could do for transparency, Peter Schweizer. One of the things I think we could do is I would like to see their emails between their brokers. I'd like to see those things put into one channel. Here's the channel through which you can discuss things with your broker. And by the way, it's going to go into a drive. And if we have questions ethically, we're going to go just open that drive up and look at it. And we'll just have the Ethics Commission do that. The other thing is, Peter, we got about 2 minutes here. Peter Schweizer's with us. Brilliant authors, protected you, informed you about corruption on both sides of the aisle. In this case, it's right now 1 Democrat, 3 Republicans. Is also this. I believe this would involve significant structural changes to the way our government works. Why do we have to have the Senate look into the Senate? You said the DOJ. I love that. What about having a consistent, constant body, Peter Schweizer, that could actually police ethics?
That's a brilliant and vital point. Look, politicians in America are the only set of people that have power who basically get to write their own rules. If there were a corporate executive of a publicly traded company engaging in this behavior or engaging in some of the other shenanigans that go on, the SEC would throw the book at them. And the reason is because the SEC rules have been written by politicians. But politicians don't apply those rules to themselves. So I agree with you. We have to get past the time when we believe that these elected officials can police themselves. They've demonstrated over and over again that they can't. And the problem is it's very hard to find information about these trades. So the notion that, voters are just going to figure this out in this complex financial world and voters will hold them accountable is just not true. The rules and laws that apply to you, that apply to me, that apply to Rush, that apply to the guy down the street should apply to our elected officials, period. Nonstop, end of discussion.
Couldn't agree more. It's Peter Schweizer, peterschweizer.com. I imagine the Team IB put a link up there. And Peter, just thank you. God bless you for your work and what you're doing for the American people. Your work is fascinating. It's vital. And I'm so very pleased that you joined us today on Rush's show. Godspeed. Stay healthy, too, Peter. We need you.
Thanks, Todd, so much.